Let's make sure we're live. Okay, guys, welcome to Wolf Crypto. Really excited to get into the conversation. Appreciate everyone who comes through to these conversations. I've recently this year, quite literally this year, become orange pilled. I've learned a lot about the Bitcoin world, the Bitcoin mining world. I've had the pleasure of speaking with CryptoMags a million times, it feels like, on Spaces, but I was like, man, I have not had that sit down one-on-one to talk with her and dive into her life a little bit. Mags is out there deep in the game. She also launched the first Bitcoin Canadian fund. She's been 10 years in the carbon energy markets. She's a giga brain in this market. And so there's a few things I want to talk to her about the Bitcoin world, where we're headed, Bitcoin mining and energy, as well as she's coming out with a book. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. But Mags, welcome to the show. I can't wait to get into it.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Let's do it. And by the way, for anyone who is watching along, if you haven't already, please do hit that like button, retweet the stream. Let people know that we're out here and we're talking all things Mags today. Anyways, Mags, I would love to, if you could, just give a quick little, just like the 30-second, 1 minute breakdown, the high level of how, maybe why you even entered the Bitcoin space first off. And hold on, I think you may have been frozen.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, there we go. You're back.
I went to go and retweet. Oh my God.
No worries at all. No worries. If you could just give us the quick little overview, how you got into Bitcoin. What was even the reason you found interest? How long ago was that?
Was the number go up? Honestly, I think my story. But that said, my story is very similar to most, where you're just watching everything. Like, I was into markets and I was day trading, and oh my God, that was a disaster. I'm glad, because I was day trading like oil stocks back then, because and natural gas, because they were going up the most, and I compared to something like a bank, right? And I learned, I think, off of that I'm a terrible day trader. So it really set me up for the Bitcoin space, which has like 20% moves in a day. Because I would be like, I'm the one that when price is falling, I'm like, oh my God, I have to sell it. Price is going up. Oh my God, I have to buy it. So thank God I got that out of my system in the energy markets. So I saw Bitcoin going up, and I was like, what is this? Right. And then typical crypto story is like that. Then I was like, oh my God, there's Ethereum, there's ICOs. Let's sell all the Bitcoin into these things because they're going up higher. And it's a sad story where a lot of us lost money, and I didn't get back into the black until 2020. So I feel like I joined in 2020, really, not 2017, because it took me a while to sort of figure out that there's some pretty bad stuff and bad actors out there. And so that's my getting into Bitcoin story. But then once you fall down the rabbit hole, you really go down the rabbit hole, right? You learn about all sorts of things. And one of my first I was working kind of like on policy, because Canada had Quadriga. Now it's FTX, but before FTX, it was Quadriga.
Oh, I remember. I watched the whole Netflix documentary on this.
Oh, I know. So I'm actually a creditor appointed by the Supreme Court to as a bankruptcy inspector. So I'm one of 5 that oversees the bankruptcy, and we did distribute last year. We beat Mt. Gox.
Yes.
But that was a ride in itself. And so part of that, I was, the Canadian government, just like the regulations came in hard, like 3-4 months later after Quadriga happened, because that was 200 million is a lot for Canada, right? We're not like anyways for Canadian markets, so that was pretty significant. And then I got involved with 3IQ, which was trying to launch the first Bitcoin fund, very similar to Grayscale in the US, where the Canadian regulator came in and said, no, it is not in the public interest to for the public to invest in Bitcoin, right? And so 3IQ fought for 3 years to against this kind of, I wouldn't call it a ruling because it never went to court, but against this designation that regular people could invest in Bitcoin. And after 3 years, they won. So I joined on and I helped them with the IPO of the Bitcoin fund. So going around to all the banks and talking to financial advisors and trying to get them on board. Because when you launch a fund, you do need a certain amount of money to flow in. And hedge funds were typically the type of folks that were more interested than and some of the family offices, like the big banks, weren't ready for it yet. It took them a really long time. They were busy debanking our industry. We had our own
all in a day's work.
We have our own choke point 2.0 in a way. And so yes, that was pretty awesome because that ruling, the 26-page ruling, after that came out, and which effectively, 26 pages effectively saying yes, Canadians can invest in Bitcoin in a fund. All the ETFs in Canada were able to launch because they basically copied the prospectus. So part of the reason we have ETFs is the judge struck down that, the Securities Commission's very similar story to the US, except we beat you, haha. So I've been around. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please. So
I moved around the space, like different verticals. I've been fortunate to work in custody. So I work for CoinKite, which is one of Canada's oldest Bitcoin companies. So they make hardware wallets, like the Cold Card. And then I also, but my heart belongs to mining. And the reason, nice little ASICs over here. Because I spent a decade working I worked in government. Yes, I know. Reformed civil servant over here.
we got one back. We got one back, everybody.
I know. And so, but I worked a decade in energy markets and carbon markets. And those two, right, decarbonization and energy really, really fit into Bitcoin mining. And I think it's pretty awesome how policymakers for so long now, think back to like the Kyoto Protocol, where like from the 90s, where they're trying to make reductions. Like those goalposts keep shifting. There's not enough money being put in to get the reductions that we need. And so meanwhile, you have these little tiny machines, right? And yeah, they exude heat, but they also exude Bitcoin, and they need power. They need a lot of power. And the most amazing thing is they're the ones who are actually helping now shore up existing infrastructure, but also finance renewables and finance decarbonization projects like off of landfill gas, which actually has really incredible reduction potential for not just the mining industry, just the world in general. So I think, circling back, that's the place I'm meant to be, because we are actually doing it, we're doing it through this elegant system of economics.
I was going to ask this. So you worked in a bunch of places. I feel like the first thing people are wondering is like, okay, that's awesome that you work in all those places. How do I even get one of those? How do I even get my foot in the door? So how was your process? Because I feel like, whenever I ask this question, I get a bunch of like, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. But I'm actually more curious on how it worked for you, and then some of the things and learnings you pulled from it.
Yeah, so actually at CoinKite, I was hiring for a number of roles, and it kind of helped me figure out sort of, like, especially Bitcoin companies, they really look for folks that understand Bitcoin. And not always, you don't always have to have the experience. It sort of depends on the role, but fundamentally, if you want to be in the Bitcoin space, you have to have some understanding of Bitcoin, because it's very different world. But what I would always like craft a letter, an email afterwards, like, this is what I think you should do because you're missing certain types of experience, and here's how you can get it. And it really boils down to proof of work. And that work can be anything. So if you're applying for like a mining company or a wallet company, play around with the tech, try mining at home, connect to a pool, buy a cheap miner, put a little bit of investment and play with those tools. Wallets, like, set up different custody solutions for yourself, play with the different wallets, connect your wallet to different software wallets, like your hardware wallet to different software wallets, like use the tech, because that explains to me that, like, if again, for CoinKite, if you apply to a company, if you've never used a hardware wallet, like, you're not going to make it. Right?
Literally, quite literally,
like, how can you even provide support? Because especially for the smaller companies, like, you're probably wearing different hats. Sometimes maybe you report, answering a support question, right? And so, so that's one part. Another part is go to your meetups. Your network is kind of your net worth, and I really believe that, and because folks already have these connections. So if you're applying to a job, especially women, because this industry has been 80% men for such a long time, and those men know each other, and so when they apply, they're like, hey, my buddy's applying, can you pull his resume and make sure at least he gets an interview, right? So build that network too, because once you start to know people, you can be like, hey, I'm applying to this job, because there's just so many applications, right? And so it can help you at least get that first interview, and then like it's on to you, but other people are doing it. And just also like, because by networking, you can help connect people, and then people remember you and they may want to help you down the road, or maybe you want to, do a podcast.
Yep.
So you invite them to your podcast, or you're writing a book and you're collecting stories for your book, right? So your network is huge. And yes, meetups are great, but if you're living somewhere that's maybe remote, honestly, go online, like join spaces all the time, make posts, ship posts, respond to people's posts, get to know each other. Because I made a lot of friends that, especially during COVID, like I really started getting out there playing VR. Like Bitcoiners had a weekly meetup in VR, right? And
That's awesome.
people, I know it's so weird when we hung out in person for the first time, but it's like, honestly, like people know each other. You get to know each other online, and then it's like it's just cool. You get to hang out. So that's the second one. And third is like volunteer for things. Whether maybe you're a developer, so contribute to some open source things. If you're not a developer, start a community, start a meetup, do something that you're contributing. Write articles, like thought pieces, compile work, something that shows that you understand Bitcoin. If you have threads that people really like and find of value, because you probably have some knowledge that's of value, right? That you can kind of connect to the Bitcoin space, because we need all sorts of people to explain it. The hedge fund guys, they look to different, like they follow different people than like firefighters, right? You need a blue collar worker to get the firefighters in, whereas the finance folks are very different, whereas moms are different. They think about different things, right? So you need different people to connect, and different way of explaining Bitcoin, I think. So I think those are sort of the three main ways that I think you can get in.
Yeah, I think one of them, what you said there, is the knowledge base. I think that helps tremendously. It just gives you that confidence that you can walk into a room and not just be totally like, oh, I don't know anything about this sector. It's like, well, you know enough to get through, to learn more, and to get better. And then, yeah, I mean, definitely making yourself available to help and putting out that content. I mean, I always say no one will know to hire you, even if if Albert Einstein's, like if you're Albert Einstein or Elon Musk level IQ, if no one knows you're that level of IQ, you're never going to get that opportunity. You have to take that chance to put yourself out there. You probably think of a million things that you could apply that into life. But especially in the job market, I think. And in Bitcoin, it's a relatively, I mean, it's a big world, but it's a small world at the same time in this Bitcoin crypto world,
Yeah, the crypto world is so much bigger, I think.
Yeah, it is big. And there's quite a difference. I didn't really know until this year. I literally had Simon Dixon on a space, and I had him orange pill me. This was a long time ago. This is probably 7 months ago. And I was like, hey, I'm missing something, because I can't stop thinking of Bitcoin as just like above Ethereum. It's just like it's like the top altcoin. What am I missing? Why are billionaires dumping irrational amounts of their net worth into Bitcoin? This makes no sense. It can't just be because
why are countries mining Bitcoin? Why are countries thinking of reserves? Yeah.
What am I missing? And he was like, okay, you're thinking about it like this. You got to think about it like this. He's like, it's the asset itself. He goes, it's not pegged to the dollar. He goes, it's pegged to these Satoshis. And he started to explain it. And I was like, and he's like, there's a certain amount, all the basic stuff. But I was just like,
yeah.
That's so true. And then it just clicked.
So you found your person, right?
Yeah.
You have to find the one person.
I needed it. I just needed it. I mean, we were just doing Bitcoin spaces all the time. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to ask this guy, because he's the guy who apparently everyone loves. This guy. He's been in Bitcoin for a long time. Let me ask him. And so that was cool. Nice. But anyways, I wanted to ask. So in the Bitcoin, or sorry, for Canada, you mentioned, well, you didn't mention, you put out a whole entire thing about this. So Canada needs Bitcoin in its treasury. Can we talk about a little bit about Canada's just layout and breakdown of what they've got going on, how they've sort of distributed out, things that they buy into as assets, and then maybe why they haven't dove into Bitcoin, and what your thoughts are for 2025.
Well, Trudeau's gone.
Question. So
Trudeau's gone, so we have a chance.
True. You do.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, that's actually, so I wrote a big article, and at the end of it, I kind of stressed, like, Bitcoin is unfortunately partisan, right? Just like in the US, Pierre Poilievre, which is the leader of the opposition, the Conservatives, he 2-3 years ago, gave this really amazing speech about, inflation and money, what is money and money printing. And he also mentioned Bitcoin at some point, and Trudeau just skewered him because Bitcoin had fallen kind of like to that low, I think like around 16,000. And then Pierre was like, oh, yeah, sure, Trudeau was like, buy Bitcoin. Like if you did, you would have lost all your money kind of thing, right? And then so unfortunately, Pierre had to stop talking about Bitcoin for a while because it was a point for them to get at him, right? I mean, look at us now. Like obviously
right.
you would have like 5x or whatever your money. Well, no, sorry, I checked the price today. Not so much, but you know what I mean? And so it became this partisan thing, but at the same time too, in a lot of the liberal government. So I live in British Columbia, which has a mining moratorium on it, right? Very like we are so far left. Traditionally, we didn't even have like any conservatives in government, and so that's really frustrating, right? And so there seemed to be like this hatred for Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. And so let me go back to sort of Canada's reserves. So Canada sold off all their gold, finished under Trudeau in like 2016, right? Typically, countries use gold as a hedge against economic uncertainty, inflation crisis, and they also use it to stabilize their economies. Canada does tend to rely on the U.S., so we do put a lot of our reserves into foreign currency reserves like the U.S. Dollars or also U.S. Treasury bonds. But basically, we sold our gold and we traded it for more of these things. We also hold something called special drawing rights, which are allocated by the IMF, and it's to allow sort of exchange between IMF countries. So they're not a currency itself; it's like a basket of currencies of the different members, but it presents a potential claim on these. Anyway, so we have these things, right? We have treasury bonds, we have other countries' money, and we have these SDRs. And so, why did Canada sell its gold? Well, we said it was. They were trying to be more, not innovative. They were trying to get assets that were more liquid and that were interest bearing. So, treasuries, for example, have a bit of interest, and so do SDRs. But it's just like thinking about where gold went since like even 2016, right? A little bit like Canada printed a lot of money in the last, during COVID. So I don't know if that was the best sort of thing to do. So given that all these countries are contemplating strategic Bitcoin reserves, I've kind of lost track amongst all the US states. There's multiple states in the US. Bhutan already owns Bitcoin because they've been mining. El Salvador, as we know, has been buying and mining. So I think, I think it's time for Canada to kind of look at that, and largely because we have a lot of economic challenges, right? Like we're really lagging in GDP growth per capita. There's these charts that I pulled up in my article. Amongst the G7, we're lagging, right, in terms of GDP per person. Our dollar is falling compared to the USD. Like some people think it might go to 50 cents when Trump comes in. Right, it's not good. So we have a major stock exchange, the TSX, Toronto Stock Exchange, and it's only grown by 8% in recent years, and it's trailing like if you look at the S&P, like US. Typically, everybody compares to the US, but honestly, it's been doing badly. And also, we're in a lot of debt, right? our debt is outpacing GDP growth, and so it doesn't bode well, right? So I do think putting some funds and establishing one could help address Canada's challenges, right? Because it's an alternative to the currency depreciation and inflation that we've been having, right? So expanding into that could help hedge against further depreciation, a hedge against globally disruptive events. We seem to be having like every month a new globally disruptive event.
Oh my God, that's the realest statement I've ever heard in my life.
Right? Like look at right now. Like even the fires. Yes, the fires aren't impacting Canada directly, but indirectly, like some people are saying, bonds, like municipal bonds, are going to fall, that are going to affect the rest of the bond market because, municipalities maybe are going to go bankrupt. Insurance and reinsurance, like they're going to, like some companies are going to get blown out, and that's going to affect the reinsurance market. And, so there are crises. And BlackRock did a really good report against Bitcoin, a unique diversifier, where they kind of looked at the returns over 30, 60 days of Bitcoin compared to other things like gold and the SPX, where yes, Bitcoin usually fell a little bit right away after a big extreme event, but then after it, like within 10 days or 60 days, it did so much better compared to some of the traditional types of asset allocation. So it's a good, it holds its ground through major geopolitical events. And honestly, it's kind of like a signal. Look at what El Salvador has done, right? We buy Bitcoin, right? And we are this Bitcoin country. The amount of tourism, the amount of investment attraction coming to El Salvador, it just kind of shows that they're open to innovation. And I think Canada needs that a little bit, right? Yeah, and so just there's some benefits. And so how?
Yeah.
How could Canada do this? Well, obviously they could sell some of their traditional assets, right? Like kind of reverse what they sold gold for. But I think too, one of the maybe easier to do but harder to implement, especially bureaucratically, would be we are a nation that is just blessed with energy, right? We have massive amounts of hydropower. We have, I believe, the second largest oil reserve in the world. And so we have energy. It's just, and some of it is obviously stranded, right? Sometimes there's excess power. Like, so I worked in energy. I worked for the Ministry of Energy in Ontario. And there were times when we had to sell energy cheap, like massively at a discount to other provinces. And so instead, we could be mining Bitcoin, right? Off of our energy resources, just like Bhutan, just like El Salvador. And so, we have excess hydro sometimes in Quebec and British Columbia. We have wind and solar in the prairies, right? Sometimes during certain seasons or times of the day, there's excess. Stranded natural gas in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And Alberta is the Texas of Canada, right? They are very similar.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They've done a bunch of trade missions to Texas, including sending miners there. So I think out of all the provinces, they are the most favorable. And if any like province were to launch a reserve, it would be them. And then obviously we have nuclear in Ontario. 50% of base load is nuclear. So it does get a little bit complicated in terms of how it's done, because it's energy is a provincial thing. A lot of so the provinces typically own generation. So it would just basically require a lot of bilateral, multilateral agreements and figuring out how to allocate profits and things like, priority is energy is going to regular civilians rather than like mining, right? So miners have to shut down for figuring out sort of when, but I think it's possible, right? And so whether it's possible to actually happen, I think it could be a good chance if the US first mover advantage, because everyone kind of follows what the US does. So that would definitely help. But B, if the conservative government gets in, because Trudeau has Pierre has indicated that he understands Bitcoin. So I think there could be a chance. And it's also like how much of the conservatives get in, right? Because it can't be just like a minority government, because we actually we don't have a two-party system. We kind of have three parties, technically more, but typically what happens is there's the liberals and the conservatives, but then we have a very, very left group, which is the NDP. And so usually the liberals and the NDP kind of get together, right? We also have the Greens, but usually they're like 1 or 2% of all votes. So they're really tiny, but I would call them left too. Canada's very left. So we'll see, right? Like we might have a blue wave because conservatives are blue. It's kind of flipped around, but it's kind of like seeing where the world is heading. I wouldn't be surprised, like, especially just people were so unhappy with Trudeau. So we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that was an amazing breakdown. That was fascinating. I don't know how we. I just realized I asked that question, and in like 8 minutes, you summarized the entirety of the plot. So that was really really fascinating. We're definitely gonna clip that for later, and pull that one back up. That was really interesting. I am curious too. So with Canada doing that, what kind of progress do you think is even attainable in the next 4? Like, what? Maybe two things. Like, what would need to happen? And then what kind of timeline do you think we could be looking at? Is there any clues or any way to predict this, or is it really just up in the air and we're not sure until we really see that first one happen?
Do you mean for the reserve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Canada, we don't have sort of EOs, executive orders, right? Like Trump. So he's got an advantage where he can just do an executive order. For us, it's very much about, it would have to be put into law. So there, someone we need to draft it first, right, to provide the legislative framework for it. And so that would take time. They'd have to make sure that everyone kind of agrees with it. And depending on which way they go, if it is kind of like a mining, or maybe mining is a component, the mining would take forever because, sorry, not forever. I've seen how governments work, right? It takes a long time to sort out the agreements. So definitely, like, I think the 4 years if the mining were to happen. But if it was just to be an act, like, we do have consultation requirements. So, needs to be a notice of consultation, do a consultation. So it would take some time. I think, like, honestly, the quickest, if they were super motivated, the quickest, again, because there's like procedures, they have to read the bills a couple times. Like, I don't know if 6 months is even possible, to be honest. Like, maybe if they were super like into it, but it would take a while. Yeah. So it's not, again, unfortunately, the easiest is to do through, the executive order.
Yeah. And likely, honestly, like, I guess I've heard both sides of the argument. Some people are of the idea that in 6 days we are literally going to send forever. And then some people are like, we're going to keep the can down the road, and it's going to be the exact same process as always been. Maybe a little bit more pro, I mean, a lot more pro probably, but essentially the same thing. So I'm curious here. So in the meantime, if it does end up taking a little bit of time, which all things probably do.
Yeah.
The best thing that people probably could do is learn more about Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. I'm curious for the Bitcoin mining specifically, what kind of, I don't know if the right word is terms, but what kind of things about the Bitcoin mining industry for a beginner you think are worth focusing on and learning and knowing that may give them a bit of an edge, and maybe to give them some kind of confidence as they enter this market? Because there are so many things you could trade, but the miners are really interesting because they're stocks. So they've got all their earnings, they've got all that public stuff that has to come out. So it's really fun to keep up with it. There's, groups like the Bitcoin mining mafia that are out there, like, running around and stuff like that. Shout out to the mafia. And so anyways, I think it's a fascinating world, but I think there's so much about Bitcoin. There's the hash rate, there's megawatts. People are like, I don't even know what that means. Do I need to know that? So I would love if there are a few things that come to mind.
Yeah, I think the markets, so usually they have analysts, right? I don't think so every miner kind of reports things their own way. And if you want to be investing in the miners, it gets hard. You really have to get into the nitty gritty because they don't all report, for example, their electricity price the same way. Some of them bundle all the discounts that they get versus others don't. And so it's challenging because you think this miner, they're mining at 3.5 cents or 4 cents, where actually it's at 5 cents, but then they add in some discounts. So that's where it gets tricky, and you really have to dive into the financials or follow certain analysts. But that said, like, I don't think the miners are yet being differentiated enough in that they still really follow Bitcoin price quite a lot. Like, that's ultimately their play on Bitcoin price, just another way to play on Bitcoin price. So I think I'm still waiting for the time where it's understood more, like they really get differentiated based on, okay, so Marathon, for example, has its hand into so many different types of things, like heat recovery, right? Like they just have so many different types of business models, right? So that I think differentiates them versus a miner that just is hosting, right? A miner that does focuses a lot on demand response, like Riot, right? So there are differences, and it gets really complicated, I think, for a typical person who never kind of spent their time in energy markets. And so because I came from energy, like I understand demand response, it does get really challenging, and you really need to rely on the expertise of others. Like it's not so easy, right? From an investing side. If you just want to learn about the mining industry, I love podcasts. Honestly, there's some really good podcasts out there. Also beginner podcasts. I think Preston Pish did some of that, where you just you have to kind of understand the basic fundamentals. So I think Preston did one with Harry, where you really just dive into mining. So honestly, mining, I feel like, is one of the harder things to get into, because you don't just need to understand Bitcoin. You then need to layer on top understanding the energy system. And then maybe on top, because now miners are issuing, some of them are issuing like they're selling their equity, or they're doing the MicroStrategy strategy.
Yes.
Which then you add on top another layer of financialization. It just becomes like crazy. So just buy Bitcoin. No.
That's literally, so that's been my experience. I love the mining industry, but I found it significantly harder to figure it out than I thought it was going to be. And I was like, man, this stuff is a little bit confusing, actually.
And on top of that, like with each halving, the miners are getting lower, like the Coinbase reward is declining, right?
Yeah.
So over time, you're going to rely more on transaction fees than the mining reward. So it's going to complicate it more, because you have to kind of forecast that, and it kind of changes. It honestly gets more confusing. So I'm like, just buy your Bitcoin. And if you want to be involved in mining, honestly, just get an old S9, get an old, if you can, like a slightly better model, or play around with like the BitAxe, that's the open source miner, right? Just like mine yourself.
Yeah, there you go. That's a great idea, actually.
Like, don't expect to like make a lot of money, but it is kind of fun way to participate in the network.
Yeah.
But sorry, let me backtrack. Yes, maybe you won't make money, but at least if you're heating your house, right?
Yeah, like, there you go.
There's some benefit. It subsidizes your heating, better off than using like I have a heater that I used to use, like a 1500 watts. Like the S9 takes 1500 watts. You might as well just run the S9 versus like a heater. True. Like it's the same. You're drawing the same amount of power, right? So the S9 I found was putting a lot of heat, actually, surprisingly, but it was noisy. So I ramped it down to like 800, and it was fine.
Wow, that's nice. Yeah, I think a lot of people, I think it's a real life thing, and it's a stock, and they're in the crypto world. They're used to the, the, what's it called? Not Fugazi, Fugazi, it was the word. Smoke and mirrors. They're used to smoke and mirrors. So to enter Bitcoin miners, which is like a fun area to play, especially for people who are trying to trade and stuff like that. I think, getting a miner is probably a really good way to get some insight and to really understand, because now you've got like a real life product in your hand. Like, okay, this is how it works. This is why electricity actually matters. This is why I need to go find cheaper electricity and things like that. I want to ask this question, and I'm not sure how, we don't have to go super deep on it, but the nuclear conversation, I just feel like just a little bit on it would be interesting, because nuclear, still, for the average person, they're just thinking bombs. They're just thinking, horrible disasters. They're not thinking of using nuclear to help in any kind of way. So when people say, hey, I want to use nuclear and it's related to Bitcoin mining, what do people mean by that?
Sure. One final thought on investing in mining stocks. So we're technically in a bull market, right? We've been going up for Bitcoin. We've been going up. And I remember like people would invest in miners because they would like go 8 or 10 times the multiple of all-time highs. But looking at the mining stock prices, we're not anywhere near getting those multiples again. Like, so I think, this cycle so far is different, unless like we're still waiting for that big ramp up. They're not. Yeah, I think people are disappointed maybe. So nuclear. Again, I'm in Canada. I lived in Ontario for a long time, where 50% of baseload is nuclear. Like, nuclear is incredible. I don't really understand why you wouldn't use nuclear when you have this clean, as in it does not throw pollutants or GHGs into the air like coal or natural gas plants, right? And so I think from that perspective, it's one of the cleanest energy sources, and the energy density of nuclear compared to, I don't know, like wood is insane, right? It's so you want to move towards denser forms of energy that that you can utilize and make humanity flourish. So I think, you know, the environmentalists did a real big detriment to the industry, you know, fighting this war against nuclear, because it's cost us, right? Like in some places, you know, rolling blackouts and whatnot. And look at what's happening in Europe. I think that, you know, they're relying on Russian energy. And once a geopolitical event happens, like energy prices in Europe, you know, talking to my grandparents, you know, my grandpa's like, oh yeah, I'm just taking the tram and looking in people's homes. People don't even have lights on, right? Because energy in Europe is so expensive. Businesses are going out of business, right? Because you know, bakery, like suddenly their energy prices are 4 times more for their ovens. So it's not a good thing. So I think, but I am seeing this shift, and I think AI has kind of helped do that, because AI needs massive quantities of power. Yes, miners need big quantities of power, but AI needs even more.
Mm.
And so they're like, Microsoft is entering deals, and I think Google too, to actually just like refurbish nuclear plants and get nuclear online. But I think too, the tech has come a long way, right? We used to build these giant plants that were, you know, multiple megawatts, or gigawatts. And now we have the small SMRs, small nuclear reactors, and they kind of change the game, because you don't need this gigantic plant with a big footprint. You can go smaller scale. And I think where Bitcoin miners come in is they are the perfect sort of energy load. They take power where you can start to build a small nuclear reactor. Maybe the whole city is planned to be, you know, 10 megawatts eventually down the road, right? Because it's a little town. Well, but they only draw 4. So you can put miners in for like the rest. And then as the city gets built out, right, as we need more power, the miners will leave, right? So I think they help, and they're already doing that for renewable sites like wind, solar. So they can do that for nuclear too, as in be buying the nuclear 24/7, and providing a revenue stream that will subsidize that site, as opposed to that power not being used, and therefore, you know, paying off the nuclear, because nuclear traditionally has been super expensive to build and to refurbish, right? We're talking billions of dollars. And so typically it's you end up having to subsidize it from taxpayers as well, not just ratepayers. So the ratepayers are the ones that are buying, ratepayers are the ones that are paying for the electricity system. But there's just, because nuclear is so costly, you usually need to dip into that other pocket or go into debt as a government, right? So I think going smaller is helpful, because you don't need you know, it's not that big of a spend, and then miners can help subsidize it, and also AI, honestly. Yeah.
You know, actually, that literally goes into an AI question. I was going to ask your thoughts on that, because there's a big split in the mining world of people who say pure plays are going to run. These are the ones going to run. And then some people are saying, yeah, but what happens when they're not making much profit? They're going to have to figure out another way to make income. It's going to be the AI, the GPU. It's going to be, you know, this kind of thing. And we've seen miners go all in on one or the other. We've seen some just do both. But a lot of conversation around it. Do you have any thoughts? I feel like your perspective might be different or unique because of your experience working in the industry.
Yeah, I think it's challenging when a company starts to diversify into too many business models, right? Because there's so many things that you have to pay attention to, and you don't get as good personally. I do understand why, right? And because, and also both industries. So it's tough. So I'm kind of on the fence, because I see how bad it can get during bear markets, right?
Yeah.
Like they can get blown out, they make the wrong power deals, but it doesn't even matter if you made a wrong power deal if you're suddenly selling to the AI industry, because the amount of money that you're making compared to you know, to mining. That said, you know, the infrastructure for AI is like 10 times more expensive, right? And not every site is you're able to, because you need a really good internet connection. So I think what'll end up happening is those companies that ended up buying, they have a lot of energy at their disposal. You have like a couple gigawatts because they were getting energy contracts for mining. They have an advantage though in that they could go into the AI industry and as hosting. So maybe it does make sense for them. But I think also, so we're going to see that bifurcation where AI will kind of take up that energy, I think, because there's the potential reward is higher. But those miners then will go to other parts of the world where there's cheap energy where AI won't go, right? So they're going to have their own competitive advantage working those stranded energy resources, like in Africa, for example, and AI is never going to go there, but yet they're going to build out new infrastructure in those places, which I think is pretty incredible. So I went to Africa in December for the African Bitcoin conference, and Gridless is one of the companies that's doing some incredible work there, where they're actually funding the build out of renewables in places that had no power. So you have these little towns and villages that had zero access. The women would have to walk 2 hours to go get water instead of like the water gets pumped. They have to manually process like flour and millet and all that stuff, versus like building out a site that use like a production facility that uses electricity. So I think those are the cooler stories to me than, oh, whatever, is this company going into AI? Like, yeah, okay, AI will change the world in some ways, in different ways. But what I think is cooler is Africa, is still really, like in sub-Saharan Africa, I think it's like 20% is only connected. And they're going in and they're actually building out little micro energy sites and making humanity flourish, because suddenly kids don't have to go to bed, they can study at night, right? Or they don't have to do surgery by candlelight in the local medical clinic. I think that is a lot cooler to me, because that's really like Bitcoin fixes things, fixes this, and makes it better for us humans. Like the basic needs, like AI is like up there in terms of like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where, sorry, down here, it's like as you start going through, but like basic shelter and comforts, I think, are a lot higher. And so it can help bring the rest of the world to a place where they can even start to use AI, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay, wow. Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I think probably there could be a little bit more grace on both sides of that conversation. I see sometimes it gets pretty fiery in the Bitcoin groups there. Yeah. But that was really interesting. I'm trying to think. That's probably like some of the bulk of like the mining questions. I was curious on some things with your career. These are more like focused on your career and life, I guess. But did you ever envision you being on a, like, I don't know, expedition to push Bitcoin and to like sort of change the world, I guess? Like that's kind of what we're doing here, or at least trying to contribute to, because we believe that there's something really, really special here that could potentially come once in a lifetime or once in a generation kind of thing,
I think that's kind of why a lot of Bitcoiners have gravitated to the space, because they see the good that it's actually doing, right? Whether it's on the human rights front, right? So, or on the electrification front, like what can you do with your life that provides meaning, right? If you're just working, for the grind, I think that's why I went to government originally. I was like, I'm going to do things. I'm going to help like Canada, right? I'm going to do good policy. And then you kind of see where the money flows. And sometimes, oftentimes things get funded because A, it's like an advocacy group, or B, they want to get reelected again. And you're like, this isn't what I thought, I'd be doing, because the numbers say this makes sense from a policy perspective, but yet they're not doing that because they have other incentives, right? So I meant to do that and help. Like, actually, I was for a while in the environment industry, and then now I'm in technically the financial industry. So I never thought I'd join finance.
Same. I never thought it'd be finance.
Yeah, but we're doing the same thing through a different means, and I think that's the really cool part. So I think we all try to find, like, if we are incredibly lucky if we get to find something that we do that also sort of fills your heart. So I think that's why, a lot of Bitcoiners are here. And honestly, a lot of us lost money. That's why they're hard on the altcoins. Maybe they're not all scams. I think some of them think they're doing it for the right thing. But we've just seen, and I mean, I lost a lot of money too. We've seen it just go sideways so many times. And like the meme coins, okay, I get the part that they're fun, but like for the people that are desperate because they don't have a lot, but you look at where inflation is these days, right? They're just buying lottery tickets because they're hoping to win. And some people, again, it's like a gambling thing, right? You're just throwing money and you might lose it. And I don't know if you read Coinfessions, right? Where
I've read some.
Yeah. And you see some of them are pretty bad. Like, oh, I took my dad's money or my grandma's money and I put it in this coin and I lost all their money and I can't tell my family. Like, that's what it leads to because they lose their own money, then maybe they put other people's money. And so that's what happens. But if they had put it in Bitcoin, yeah, maybe it'll drop to the 50, 60% like it typically does. But down the road, it'll come back up again, right? Like I held my Ripple way too long from when I invested in Ripple ages ago. I guess now what would have been okay, but whatever.
You're so back.
I'm not back because I sold it. Like I held on to it for too long, like let's say 4 years, and I was like, fuck it. First time I converted.
Beehive says I love meme coins. That's hilarious.
Yeah, somebody says I love these. Honestly, like I see meme coins as if you want to do that, like it's like buying lottery tickets, just be responsible, right? If there's $100 that you're willing to lose per month, just go for it. Right. But don't expect like you're gonna make it big because like at least meme coins, people know it's a joke. Whereas some of these other things, right? Like was it the Hex? Like the Hex community? Like some of these guys are real scammers, I think. So
I don't know too much about Hex. I do know that like I started kind of like you. I started from the degen side. I got attracted by the opportunities and the money and all the attention.
Yeah.
And then I also lost money that first. So I didn't lose money, but I did the math. And at the very end of like a 2-year cycle of trading, putting all my blood, sweat, and tears in, I made $0. I made quite literally break even. Minus all the gas fees. All the gas fees. I'm sure I lost money though.
Oh my God. Yeah. Don't even get me started on the gas fees.
Thousands of dollars.
See, I know how much Bitcoin I bought and I could have retired, but instead I traded it and those things just never. Yeah. So I think that's why like those are maybe like some people make it. Some people are great traders. Some people hit it big on a coin and that's lucky, but that's no different than again, someone playing the lottery and winning big, right? There's a lot of losers, but there's like,
if you're a trader, if you're an actual TA, you're doing technical analysis and you're going level by level, that's one thing. I think after this cycle, it's going to be really tough for me to get back into alts. I do think there'll be an alt run. So I am kind of ready for that if that happens. But this cycle after that, I'm really, really attracted to the fact that with Bitcoin, it could drop 99% like the altcoins. I don't think that will happen. I feel a lot safer holding a Bitcoin.
At this point.
Yeah. I don't want to hold an altcoin 3 years. I'm fine to hold Bitcoin 3 years though. So it's interesting to me because I'm like, I wonder if other people I'm 26. I'm hoping other people my age are starting to notice that now because I'm like, okay, now just trying to get money, just trying to get rolling here. It's a good time to understand what the best asset in the world is. So I'm glad.
Why, like allocate the majority, like because you down the road probably want to be able to buy a house, right? Start a family, that kind of thing. And so most of that should be in Bitcoin. And then again, if you have like, just think of it as your gambling account. And the other thing is like, okay, altcoin season, we have this thing, but that kind of changes. So there's an altcoin season, but then there was DeFi summer, right? Then there was NFTs. Now we're talking about meme coins. It kind of changes every year. So you don't actually even know where to allocate unless you are in it 24/7. And honestly, it gets exhausting, right? Like when I was doing the ICOs, I was losing sleep. It's just so stressful. And so it's so much easier to just buy, hold, and then focus on whatever gives you value than like people, it does wreck your health. So moderation.
And I just figured like now there's so many opportunities. If you're a trader and you're like, I want to be trading, it's like, okay, that's fine. There are prop firms out there that you can pay $200 for, qualify, and you don't have to use your own money. You only lose the $200 if you blow the account. So I'm like, that's so much more for me. If you believe that you want to trade, that means you probably know how to trade a little bit at least. If you're not a trader, I would probably stay away from the prop firms. But if you think you're good at trading, I just figure, hey, put your bulk of your money somewhere good, and then use someone else's money and just risk the $200 instead of risking 200 grand.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right.
it's going to get interesting because now people are building like AI agents, right? Like AI
They are.
trading agents, and it's just
Mm,
honestly the space is getting so much bigger, and it's you really need to focus, right? Um, that's why kind of like I tend to stick in the mining space because even like just in Bitcoin on its own, like what's happening in Lightning, like I like
mhm.
to keep a periphery, like I even try to keep a general periphery on like things like me. Like there's only so much time I can allocate to just like whatever, just scroll through the feed a little bit.
Sure.
But you really have to focus to get to know because now with like things like AI agents coming in, it gets like and then they can now hold money in wallets and send money and so, now you're suddenly having to learn AI, like just
Yeah,
layers and layers. It gets really
it
confusing. Like,
does.
how much can
It
you focus
does.
on? Oh my God.
There's only one solution, and it's coming to Wolf Spaces because there's no other way I could. Like, I literally had no
Yeah.
idea about multiple sectors of crypto, DPIN, RWA. Like, there's multiple sectors I didn't really know about, and I never would have done the research. But because we did a weekly space, I'm like, okay, perfect. I'll just listen.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I agree with you. Podcasts or the podcasts or spaces, whatever long form
Yeah.
content that you can listen to, where experts come on and they speak, and you sponge it all up, and you just kind of take it all
And
in.
hope you
That's also
retain
my favorite way to learn.
10%.
Yeah. I'm curious, Max. So your day in the life. I would love to hear if there's any kind of consistency. If it's absolutely chaotic all over the place, is there any kind of what kind of day in the life are you looking at when you wake up on a normal
Yeah.
weekday?
It's a little bit more chaotic. I'm actually trying to provide a little bit more, take out the chaos. So last year, I think I went to 12 or 13 different countries. I'm seeing a
Whoa.
lot for conferences, but the main reason was so going to conferences, you meet a lot of people and you get stories. So I'm writing a book about Bitcoin mining and it really is focused, it's the geopolitics of mining, right? So you're really focusing on, I also wanted to capture all the good news stories that are happening in this space. And so by doing that, you need to talk to people, right? Every conference, I'd be like, oh my God, there's a new heat reuse case study that I didn't even hear about that I want to make sure that I include in this book. And
Mm.
so that was that. And I feel like I've collected enough. So now what I'm trying to do is like sit down and write. And my God, is it boring? Honest to God,
Oh
anyone
my
who's written
gosh.
a book, I'm like, wow, major props to you. You did it. Like, holy moly. It sucks. I'm trying, like, that's why I said I'm trying to like create a more predictable schedule. But secondly, I found actually it took me a while to get to writing because I don't know, it's just hard. And it's also like looking at the blank screen is so daunting.
Oh man,
But I
I
found
believe
an
you.
accountability buddy. Dom, who's a
Oh,
firefighter, who's actually fighting the LA fires
Dom
right now.
Bay.
Yeah, he's my accountability buddy. He's
Shout out
also
Dom.
writing a book. Yeah, shout out to Dom. Oh
Oh,
my God,
very
it's
cool.
pretty crazy out there. He's been fighting those. And
Wow.
so he's my accountability buddy. And we have to do at least 20 minutes of writing a day. Although I think I'm going to switch it to 21 because I was like, well, I can't believe we didn't say 21. If we don't, we have to pay the other person 50,000 sats. So it's about 50
Oh,
bucks US. I know.
that's
Can I
brutal.
just tell you, ever since we implemented this, I have not missed one day.
That's amazing. That's a great way to do it. Honestly, like the
It
more
is.
I've worked in the industry, the more I've realized I have to have the deadlines. I told
Yeah.
Sam actually, he was like, "Hey, I need a script for this video, whatever." And I was like, "Great." But we didn't have an exact date. It was like a range of dates,
Deadline
and it just
mode.
kept getting pushed. And I was like, you know
Yeah,
what?
I
And it
know.
got done last night. But I was like, hey, next time we need this done, like let's just
Yeah.
say Monday, just so I know it's Monday, just
Yeah.
so we have something there. It makes it so much easier.
It does. And honestly, once you sit down to write, like when you say, okay, I'm just going to write 20 minutes, oftentimes you write more, right? The
Mm.
hardest part is literally sitting down, turning on the computer and trying to figure out where to go. Because once you start writing, it starts to flow, right?
Wow,
And at
that's
least
so
that
cool.
incentive is enough to like, okay, gotta do at least 20.
Man, that's so cool. Yeah, I don't know if you ever thought you'd be writing your own book, but I would love to hear a little bit about that process. What was sort of the I know a little bit the inception. You kind of just mentioned it when you were at the conferences and stuff traveling. But what are you
Yeah.
hoping to accomplish with the book? What are you hoping people take away from the book?
Yeah, I don't think this is more for policymakers and Bitcoiners, but I feel like I wanted to contribute some of my knowledge. So again, it came from the energy and the carbon space. So I thought I have unique perspectives because I used to work with heavy industry like cement and steel. So there's like things I can take from traditional industries that I can incorporate. But also, I found that there really wasn't anything focusing on sort of like the environmental benefits, which people skewered. Although I have actually in the thought process of writing kind of pivoted the book. So I'm still including those, but I think the geopolitics is a little bit more sexy. Like the geopolitics of mining, like why
Yeah.
are nation states mining? How do they benefit, right? So there's certain like benefits that they can get, whether it's the economic development, like I was saying in Africa, or if you're blessed maybe with energy resources, but you don't have these finite resources like gold or rare earth metals, but you can leverage your energy to then acquire this digitally scarce good, for example, right? So there are, and then there's the whole censorship angle, right? If you own a lot of miners or your mining pool, you can't get censored, right? You can't get cut off from the global financial system because you have an alternative way to make sure your citizens are able to transact globally. So I think those are the types of things that, I'm focusing on that, hopefully will be well received. But it's been a ride. But here's the tough part. This space changes so much, right? Like it's so fast moving. Like we always say, it's like a day is like a month in traditional industry. So like it's really hard to write a book because things will change. Like for example, I was gonna write like thank God I didn't start writing this like fully fleshing it out yet. But the idea was I was going to talk about how El Salvador is like bypassing the IMF. They would normally borrow money from places like IMF or the World Bank, but they're like, no, they're getting all in on Bitcoin, and they're basically like moving away from the IMF. And then like just last month, they're like, yeah, okay, we'll take that IMF loan. We're going to scale back. I was like, oh my God, no, that was a big part of my thesis. for one part, just kind of move away from these traditional bodies. Like,
that reminds me so much of like the NFT space. They were like, yo, we're going to do this, this, and this on our roadmap. By the time they got to it, nobody wanted it anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, this is not good.
People just want number go up, honestly. Like
it's true. A lot of people do, I think. The big and that's why Bitcoin is attractive, because I was like, it's the only one where yes, everyone wants the number to go up, but there's like something behind it. It's not just because it can, because we should hype it up. It's like there's something behind this that's fundamentally good for the humanity. It's fundamentally better than what we've got going on right now. And when you explain to an average person, if you position the argument that way, comparing it, basically the white paper, why it existed, why Bitcoin came into existence, it's so simple to understand. And I don't think anyone really fights it. They all go, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they printed a lot of money. I got $700 in COVID and I lost it. I don't know what happened to it. And I'm still broke. And that's the average person. And so they're thinking, yeah, like I need something that's going to go up in value. But the thing is, they keep going. Like I was explaining this to my dad. He's super high level Silicon Valley, giga brain, but he just like cannot get past that Bitcoin is not just like a stock. I'm like, well, you have to think Bitcoin is not, it's not tied to the US dollar. It's like in Satoshis. That's why it's important. He's like, but you're going to sell it. I'm like, what are you going to sell it into? He goes, dollars. I'm like, but that's the whole point.
Real estate in LA. Like, I mean, come on.
Eventually we'll get it. Because I'm like, look, yeah. One day we'll get to him. One day we'll get to him. But I
don't know.
We'll see what happens.
I guess you haven't found his story, right?
Okay.
Yeah, because I think.
Wait, would you tap into this actually?
Sorry?
Would you tap into this actually because you talked to so many people about it. Like, what are some strategies that help explain a little bit?
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying like figure out what. Don't start with like Bitcoin. Find out what their concerns are day to day, right? Like what's their family history? Like for example, my family, we were in the war, there were a lot of stories from the war where, for example, after World War II, the border shifted and my grandma had land that became part of the Ukraine, and the government, stroke of a pen, the borders shifted and they're like, basically get the hell out. This is no longer yours. So she lost her family home, right? My family escaped communist Poland, where we crossed the border. Everything that fit into a Fiat car, like the Fiat cars were tiny, like back then. So you could only fit very limited items. So we left Poland to try to find better life. And so we became refugees in Germany. So again, those are some of my family stories that reinforce to me wealth that can't be taken away, wealth that you can take with yourself. So that's it for me. Maybe, your friend, she's a single mom and she's struggling, right, to buy clothes for her kids or something. And so figuring out sort of what the motivations are for those people that kind of resonates. Don't just be like, oh yes, it's an inflation hedge or something. Like maybe that doesn't just hit it for them. Yeah, figure out, or maybe they work in the philanthropy industry and they need to talk to like how Bitcoin is helping the philanthropy industry. Like something that connects into their little world is, I think, a lot more effective, right? Firefighters. So I'm a volunteer firefighter in my community, and like look at what's happening in LA. It's pretty insane. Like people are going to lose their homes. They couldn't get insurance, right? Some people buy homes like that. That is their retirement plan. Their retirement plan just burned up, right? It's really sad to lose all your things. And so, but we kind of say like Bitcoin is fire insurance, right? In a way. So just, figuring things out into those stories, like tell stories, figure out your story.
That was excellent advice. I'm very glad I brought that story up because I was not thank you for telling me that story.
Yeah,
that was great. I think I was going to say, I think for a lot of people, especially like I like these podcasts. It's almost like a bit of a journal and documentary because I'm also doing trading education. And there's a few interests I have. Bitcoin mining is one of the top ones. And I feel like for anyone who's in that boat where they're in the boat, but they're like kind of like hanging on, looking at who's in front, like who's the guy with the microphone over there. It's probably Mike Alfred, or something like that. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this conversation, Mags. This seriously was some serious Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin and Mags Alpha, because the book is coming out and I really, really hope people check it out. I have no idea what kind of timeline. I don't even want to put that one out there. I'm sure. I don't know. I've never written a book, so I have no idea if that's something you're like, oh,
no,
November.
I know. Yeah. I really hope to have it by summer, like
okay. Wow.
Like maybe I should be more aggressive, actually.
I have no idea. I don't know. Like, are you going for like a 1,000-page book, or I don't even know if like I feel like I'm asking these questions and she's like, stop asking the questions. I don't know.
I will want to get to the point where I start sending the different chapters, making sure that like the folks that are in the appropriate sections, like so the section on Africa, I want to make sure I send it to some folks that are living in like, so I talk about proof of work. I kind of am employing a proof of work perspective where I'm like, I'm not going to write a chapter about Africa without ever setting foot in Africa. Like like, no, I'm going to step on a mining site there so I can say like, hey, I was there. I got to experience it and talk to the people. Yeah. So I want them to kind of like, double check.
That's powerful too. If you have a story like, hey, when I was in Africa, when I met this guy, when I heard this person's story, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yes. Going to El Salvador actually this week. So I'm really hoping to be able to get some site. The mining site there is undergoing construction. So visitors can't visit, but they have some smaller sites. So like fingers crossed, I'll be able to make that work.
Yeah, definitely. And if you ever swing by Puerto Rico, the Wolf team moved out here. At least the CEO Gav for Wolf Financial moved here full time. Me and Sam and a few other guys in the team are here for a few months, and we'll see. We're gonna test it out. I left the East Coast because of the humidity and the heat. Yeah. I grew up on the beach, so I'm like down to go to Colorado, like the other side of the country where it's drier. And now I'm back here, tropical weather. It feels a little bit like home, but I'm not sure exactly what I'm gonna do. But if you ever come by Puerto Rico or anyone definitely hit us up.
Maybe there's a good Bitcoin community out there. Atlanta.
Yeah, right? We're gonna find out. Yeah, I would like to see if we can connect with people out here in Puerto Rico. I think it'd be a cool opportunity. There's a ton of people.
There must be a meetup. Like honestly, just like all Bitcoiners, figure out if there's a meetup in your town, and if there is not, just start one. Honest to God,
that's a great idea. It's a great idea. It's a great idea. Yeah. Wolf meetups in Puerto Rico, baby. We'll make it happen.
Seriously though,
it's a great idea. Wow. Max, I was going to say, do you want to, before we wrap, was there anything you want to shout out, mention, or just bring to anyone's attention before we say goodbye to everyone watching?
I think, just one thing. So I am involved also. I'm on the board of Proof of Workforce, which is Dombe started that, right? And we helped Orange Pill, Santa Monica to become the first Bitcoin city, right? They have a Santa Monica Bitcoin office and now a Bitcoin mayor because the vice mayor became the mayor and she was like the main person on the inside trying to get that. So I think I just wanted to make sure, shout out there, a lot of good stuff being done through Proof of Workforce. We're orange pilling unions, we're orange pilling pension funds. So I think, so I just wanted to put that out there as well. And just find me on Twitter, find Proof of Workforce on Twitter and CryptoMags and crypto because there's a funnel. We're trying to collect everybody into the Bitcoin space.
Yeah, and honestly, that is a whole nother podcast on its own. We'll have to get you back at some point. This is an amazing conversation. But that conversation about Bitcoin maxis versus people who say, "Hey, let's bring people and make them maxis." Like there's different angles. I've heard both sides, and sometimes they get pretty rowdy. So,
Yeah, they
anyways,
do.
yeah, Max, thank you so much for coming on. For anyone who's watching, please give her a follow. If you're on X, all you have to do is go to the title right above our faces, right here, and click her account name and hit the follow button. And you can find the you can also find the probably blanking the word proof of work force as well in there, and you can find all that information there. And if you are on YouTube, go to below our faces to the description down below, and you can click her page there and give her a follow. Highly recommend that you turn on those notifications and follow along and grab her book at some point that hopefully will be coming in the next 6 months, year, something like that. I have no idea what the time.
No, yeah, this year. It's got to be this year. Like this.
2025, baby.
I gotta get on to the next project. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. Have an amazing day, everybody. Take care. And boom.